The shimpaku juniper was more than just a tree. It was a living testament to time, patience, and a piece of my soul. For 15 years I had meticulously shaped its branches, coaxed its leaves into a miniature forest of emerald green. It stood in the center of my small yard, under the soft moonlight, casting an imposing shadow, like an ancient, wise sage who had silently weathered countless storms. The gnarled trunk, thick with age, twisted and turned, telling a story only I could truly understand. Each carefully pruned branch, each delicate needle of foliage, was a result of countless hours spent nurturing, trimming, and watering. I felt a profound connection to it, a kinship that transcended mere ownership. It was a part of my family, a silent confidant, valued at $15,000, but worth far more than any monetary sum to me. Touching its rough bark, I could almost hear the whispers of time, feel the slow, steady pulse of life that flowed through its ancient veins. Then there was Karen Whitmore. If my shimpaku was a symbol of serene beauty and patient cultivation, Karen was its antithesis, a whirlwind of chaotic negativity, a walking embodiment of everything petty, greedy, and shamelessly intrusive. The entire neighborhood, a quiet enclave of manicured lawns and friendly faces, held a collective, simmering animosity towards her. It wasn't just dislike, it was a deep-seated, bone-chilling aversion, the kind that made people instinctively grip their belongings tighter and exchange wary glances whenever she appeared. She was a collector of other people's discarded treasures, a self-proclaimed finder of lost things, though lost was often a euphemism for blatantly stolen. Mr. Williams's comfortable outdoor chair had vanished, only to reappear on Karen's porch, accompanied by her signature saccharine sweet excuse, "Oh, I thought it was abandoned." Mrs. Jones's garden hose mysteriously migrated across property lines, and the Parker family's kitten. Well, no one dared speak of the kitten, but the suspicion hung heavy in the air. My own encounter with Karen's borrowing habit involved a pricey Swiss watch, ordered as a rare treat, which disappeared from its ripped-open package on my doorstep, only for me to spot her, hand half hidden beneath a ridiculously large coat, wearing an expression of infuriating, guilt-free innocence. She looked my bonsai with greed, and I think a bit of disdain. That night, as I sat on my porch, savoring the last of the evening's warmth, a strange unease settled over me. It started with a dream, a vivid, unsettling vision of my beloved bonsai withering, its branches brittle and snapping, its vibrant green fading to a sickly brown. Then, as if summoned by the nightmare, a large black crow landed on a nearby branch, its harsh guttural caws piercing the tranquility of the night. It felt like an omen, a dark premonition of something terrible about to unfold. The air, usually filled with the sweet scent of jasmine, seemed thick with an unspoken dread. I tried to shake off the feeling, but a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach, a cold premonition that something precious was about to be taken from me. The feeling of unease lingered into the next morning, a subtle but persistent dissonance in the usual symphony of my day. I stepped out onto the porch, expecting the familiar comforting sight of my shimpaku, bathed in the soft golden light of dawn. Instead, I was met with emptiness. A gaping void where my bonsai had stood, its absence a physical blow. My breath hitched, a cold hand squeezing my heart. "No," I whispered, the word barely audible. It was as if a vital organ had been ripped from my chest, leaving a raw, bleeding wound. I frantically scanned the yard, searching for any sign, any clue. Had it been a strong wind, impossible. The pot was heavy, the tree firmly rooted. Had an animal? No, the fence was intact, the gate securely closed. My eyes darted around, searching, hoping, desperately clinging to any explanation other than the one that was rapidly forming in my mind. I checked the small patch of earth where it used to sit, looking for footprints, overturned soil, anything. Nothing. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone, the cold metal a stark contrast to the burning panic rising within me. I scrolled through the security camera footage, my heart pounding in my ears. The hours ticked by on the screen, each second an eternity. Then, at precisely 4 a.m., a figure emerged from the shadows. Short, stocky, bundled in a thick coat, the intruder moved with a slow, deliberate purpose that chilled me to the bone. I squinted, trying to make out the face hidden beneath the dim streetlight. A strand of messy blonde hair, illuminated for a fleeting moment, sent a jolt of recognition through me. Karen, I hissed, the name a venomous curse. It was her, the neighborhood menace, the embodiment of everything I despised. On the screen, she struggled to lift the heavy pot, her movements clumsy but determined, like a vulture picking at a carcass. She dragged my precious bonsai out of the frame, as if she'd just won the lottery of my misery. Less than 2 minutes later, I was pounding on Jack's door, my knuckles raw. Jack, my next-door neighbor and a fellow victim of Karen's acquisitions, opened the door, his face still creased with sleep. "What's going on?" "It's barely sunrise," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I thrust my phone at him, the security footage replaying Karen's brazen theft. "She did it, Jack. She stole my bonsai, my $15,000 bonsai." Jack watched the footage, his sleepiness instantly replaced by a familiar simmering anger. "Karen again," he hissed, his voice tight with frustration. "I swear, that woman has no shame. She probably thought you wouldn't dare call the police over a plant." "She's terribly mistaken," I growled, my jaw clenched. "This isn't just a plant, Jack. It's a part of me, and she's going to pay for this." I held the phone closer, showing Karen in her floral PJs. "So, what are you going to do?" "Call the cops?" Jack asked, crossing his arms, a skeptical look on his face. I took a deep breath, a plan, a deliciously wicked plan, already forming in my mind. "No, not yet," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I have something else in mind, something more fitting. Karen needs a lesson she'll never forget." The following days were a blur of focused activity. I delved into the obscure world of entomology, specifically the fiery world of ants. I learned about Solenopsis invicta, the red imported fire ant, their aggressive nature, their painful sting, the potent venom they injected. I consulted with Dr. Ilara Vance, a quirky but brilliant entomologist I found online, who, after an initial period of bewilderment, became surprisingly enthusiastic about my unorthodox pest control problem. "Fire ants, you say?" Dr. Vance had asked, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "Fascinating creatures. Their venom contains a complex cocktail of alkaloids, causing a burning sensation, hence the name. Are you having an infestation?" "Not exactly," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Let's just say I'm anticipating one, and I need to know how to contain it, temporarily." Dr. Vance, bless her eccentric heart, provided me with detailed instructions on creating a temporary, contained fire ant habitat, emphasizing the importance of safety precautions. "Remember," she warned, her voice stern, "these are not pets. They are wild creatures and they will defend themselves. Wear thick gloves, long sleeves, and for goodness sake, don't get them on your skin." I acquired a new bonsai, strikingly similar to my stolen shimpaku from a specialty nursery. This one, while beautiful, lacked the years of painstaking shaping, the soulful essence of my lost tree. It was a decoy, a beautiful, carefully crafted trap. Finding a source of fire ants was trickier, but eventually I found a seller on the fringes of the internet, a shadowy figure who dealt in exotic creatures. The preparation was meticulous, nerve-wracking. Wearing thick leather gloves, long sleeves tucked into the gloves, and a full-face respirator, I carefully transferred a portion of the fire ant colony into the new bonsai pot, creating a hidden nest within the soil and root system. The tiny creatures, a seething mass of reddish-brown, were surprisingly aggressive, their tiny mandibles snapping at anything that came near. I placed the gift in the exact spot where my shimpaku had once stood, a silent invitation to a thief. That night, I watched the security monitor with a mixture of anticipation and grim satisfaction. The hours crawled by. At 11 p.m., the lights were still on in Karen's house. Through the gap in her curtains, I could see her silhouette, her eyes glued to my yard. "Look," I heard her whisper, her voice barely audible through the closed windows, but picked up by my strategically placed outdoor microphone. "He's bought another one, and it's even more beautiful than the last one." Her husband, a perpetually weary-looking man who seemed to have long ago surrendered to his wife's whims, sighed. "Karen, please, just leave it alone. The last time—" "Shut up," Karen snapped, her voice sharp and dismissive. "I'll get it before he even notices it's gone." Her husband shook his head, muttering something about being crazy, but he didn't try to stop her. He knew, as I did, that when Karen wanted something, nothing could stand in her way. Like a shadow, Karen slipped out of her house and into my yard. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, making her movements seem even more furtive, more predatory. She crouched down, her eyes gleaming with avarice, and carefully, oh, so carefully, lifted the bonsai pot. "Ha! Too easy," she murmured, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She hugged the pot to her chest, as if afraid someone might snatch it away, and scurried back towards her house. Then it happened. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the soil, a rustling of leaves, and then a scream. A high-pitched, ear-splitting shriek of pain and terror that shattered the night's silence. Karen jumped as if electrocuted. Red, angry welts began to appear on her hands, her arms, her neck. The fire ants, disturbed from their carefully constructed nest, were swarming, their tiny but potent stings delivering a fiery punishment. "Oh my God, they're biting me! Help me!" she screamed, flailing wildly, slapping at her body, trying to dislodge the furious insects. But the more she slapped, the more frantic the ants became, their tiny mandibles sinking deeper into her skin. Her husband rushed out, his face a mask of panic. "What did you do?" he yelled, his voice a mixture of fear and exasperation. "It's the ants! Ah, they're everywhere!" Karen ran into the house, towards the kitchen, grabbing a towel and desperately trying to wipe them off. But it was too late. The ants had spread, crawling onto the sofa, across the wooden floor, even starting to climb up her husband's legs. "What the hell are you doing? They're crawling all over me," he shouted, joining his wife in a grotesque dance of pain and panic. Karen, a whirlwind of disheveled floral pajamas and flailing limbs, burst back out of the house. "Help me! They're everywhere!" she shrieked, stomping her feet, hitting her arms and legs, her screams echoing through the now awakening neighborhood. The street fell silent for a moment, a collective intake of breath. Then heads began to turn, eyes widened in a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Mrs. Simmons, the neighborhood gossip, emerged from her porch, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. "What's all the commotion now?" she muttered, her voice dripping with feigned concern. A middle-aged man, still holding a beer in his hand, chuckled derisively. Looks like Karen's gotten herself into trouble again. Serves her right. Children, roused from their sleep, pointed and giggled. Look at her, jumping around like she's won the lottery. One boy with glasses exclaimed, holding up his phone to capture the spectacle. Another child replied, Look at her face, it's all red. Phones were raised, the sound of photos being taken and suppressed laughter rippling through the air. Karen, oblivious to the growing audience, ran towards the public water faucet on the roadside, her hands trembling as she turned it on full blast. Oh my God, they're biting me, I'm going to die, she wailed, splashing cold water on her face and arms, but the stinging, burning sensation persisted, each bite a tiny needle prick of agony. Mrs. Simmons, peering closer, suddenly burst into loud laughter. Good Lord, she's been bitten by fire ants. The neighborhood erupted in laughter, a chorus of amusement and schadenfreude. A man shook his head, chuckling. I thought it was something serious. A young man, filming the scene with his phone, laughed delightedly. You won't be able to wash it off. Those bites will itch for days. Karen screamed in frustration and continued to struggle, but the tiny ants had already done their job. Her cries were drowned out by the waves of laughter, the spectacle of her torment captured for posterity, ready to be shared online within minutes. I, meanwhile, sat on my porch, sipping my coffee, enjoying the show with a quiet, grim satisfaction. But that wasn't enough. The next morning, I meticulously reviewed the security footage, isolating the clearest frames of Karen, in her ridiculous pajamas, sneaking into my yard, carrying away my precious, and now avenged, bonsai. I attached the video to an email addressed to the local police department, along with a brief, concise message. Bonsai value $15,000. This is not petty theft. It didn't take long. Less than an hour later, the sound of police sirens pierced the morning calm, stopping directly in front of Karen's house. The neighbors, predictably, emerged from their homes, peering through curtains, some even stepping out onto their porches, eager to witness the unfolding drama. 2 police officers stepped out of the car, their expressions stern. Mrs. Whitmore, one of them said, his voice amplified by authority. You are under arrest for theft of high-value property. Karen rushed out of the house, her face pale, hastily pulling on a sweater over her pajamas, her hair a disheveled mess that mirrored her inner turmoil. No, it's just a misunderstanding, she stammered, her voice distorted by panic. It's just a plant, just a plant. The taller officer crossed his arms, his voice cold and unwavering. That plant is worth $15,000, Mrs. Whitmore. I suggest you call your lawyer.